Yo, what's going on, Relay? Kofuzi here with Tommie Runz, and this is episode 2 of, I don't know what we're calling it, Running Influencer Podcast, for lack of a better name. I don't know what's in a name anyway.
I don't like that name.
Okay. Well, you didn't come up with any other good
The
options.
No Name Podcast.
No Name Podcast is so, I feel like there's probably a dozen podcast names.
There's got to be a bunch of
the No Name Podcast, but we're here and we're going to talk about how people exist kind of in the running world, even though some of us are not running professionals in terms of like actually being like at the world-class elite level of the sport, but we're still kind of here, you know?
Yeah.
So
Can they see us too?
yeah, they can see us too because it's going to go up on YouTube or Relay, Patreon. I'm not sure where, but it'll go up. They'll see it with
YouTube. Yeah. I got a name, I think, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
a play on behind the scenes,
Okay.
right? But behind the influence.
Yeah. Okay. But okay. How do we? But okay.
Mike did not like it immediately.
I just wanted to have. I don't need. It doesn't have to say have run in the name, but I kind of wanted to have run in the name or something like that. So you know it's about runners.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess it could be behind the influence, behind the influencer. Influence versus influencer, I think, is hard because then it's like influence suggests
yeah.
like
It could be anything. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
That's why I like influencer. But I don't know. We can workshop this some more. I'm gonna probably edit this whole part out.
Maybe not right now. No, like this has to be in there.
Okay, fine. We'll leave it all in here. But Tommie,
I like the idea that your show has no name because it speaks to what you guys are doing, which is like, hey, brand, would you like to partner? Like, I'm open to collaboration. Open to collaboration.
Open to collaboration. Okay. I think I love that.
There's
line.
It
still
doesn't
no
roll off
running.
the tongue at all.
See, that's the real reason why we got Peter Bromka here. For those of you who don't know, I mean, everyone that's watching this really knows who Peter Bromka already is, but we thought that this would be a great person to bring in. Peter is I would say a multi-hyphenate. He's an excellent runner himself. He runs with Bowerman Track Club Elite, which is not the professional group.
Which is a bad name. We can talk about that sometime. It's a bad name.
From one bad name to another.
Yeah.
But he's also someone that has a regular job. He's a dad. He's a husband, and he's a writer as well. He writes about running. If you don't know if you've read Peter Bromka's writing about running, you probably have read Peter Bromka's writing about running. So, Peter, we're glad to have you here today. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I enjoyed the first episode of this yet to be named podcast, and I'm excited to participate. Also, like I messaged you, I feel like many of the listeners, I maybe speak for many of them when I say I have questions for you two that I would love, essentially more backstory. I'm really curious about more the trajectory. But
Sure.
yeah, I'm happy to be here with you guys. We have a lot to dig into.
Tommie, what do you got a race coming up? We were just talking about this off camera. What do you got coming up?
Well, I got Twilight 5000 tomorrow.
So by the time this comes out, it'll have already happened.
This is not an evergreen episode. Yeah, so I'm racing soon, and it's a Twilight 5000 here in Detroit, and I'm really excited about it. And I've been training for some faster stuff because I got Berlin on the horizon, so it should be fun. And I'm actually going to be me and a couple buddies of the PR project are going to be emceeing the event tomorrow night. So all three of us are in different.
Okay.
All three of us are not purposely, but all three of us are in different heats. So, two of us will be there like at all times at least. So this should be a fun, cool, like wild night. So
you'll be like on like the high school PA system, like.
no, I think no, they're gonna have a DJ.
Oh,
so
okay.
she's bringing like
Okay.
like 4 mics.
Okay.
All I need is 1 mic, but she's bringing 4.
I like that you're bringing the heat to. I know this is what Tracksmith is doing, is bringing the excitement to track 5K. But in general, I'd say most of us amateur runners don't run a lot of track 5Ks, which they can be super intimidating. And I like the Tracksmith approaching that, but then I think you're like making it real. You're like, no, I'm prepping for it. I'm excited to take it on. Like, it's making it a little more less precious, more like here we go.
Yeah, like here we go, like have some fun, but then also like try to like flow it into the summer of speed vibe. It should be really cool though. But I'd much rather cause I definitely want to hear that's about how you do what you do, because I heard about you, Peter, well before I met you, and you inspired me with your writing about running.
Huh.
Like the way that you like reflect on I guess like the emotions and the thoughts that I think all of us go through, but just never really put it into like words, to the point where someone else could maybe like pull from it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I try to do that in a lot of my captions, but I guess if I could start you off with a question like, when did you start writing about your running in the way that you do?
No, it's a great question. And thank you for saying that. I mean, I find that when people say I was inspired by this or that, it's 2023, and in 2014, I ran the Chicago Marathon, and it was the first, afterwards, I wrote an essay about it. I kind of sat down, went to a cafe, got a beer, started writing, and like within a few hours, I had a form of an essay that then I sent to a friend who was a writer, and I sent it to her like, hey, I'm thinking of putting this online. There's this new website, medium.com. I think I'm going to put it up. Would you give me some feedback? And so she did, and in short order, I put it online. And then, I mean, this speaks to like internet 9 years ago. I put it on my Facebook, and it just like, for myself, it went like wildfire. Like, I'm super proud of that essay. Even going back now and reading it again, I'm like, whoa, where did this like come from? I mean, to spoil an essay that's been out 9 years, my father was going through heart trouble at the time, and he was a runner growing up. So the title of the essay is Raised a Runner. He brought me to the track when I was like 6 days old and like put me on the track and was like, hey, look, here we go. So I've always been a runner, but in those years I was coming back to competing and back to racing, and I ran the Chicago Marathon and had this wonderful day, and really was just like, wow, that was an amazing day I never want to forget about, and I would love to be able to come back to, and I'm not sure how many days like this I'll have, so I want to capture it and tell the story. And something about just the poetry of like that moment in my life, I thought, I'm not going to write this as kind of like a blog post of here's what happened, ABC, a timeline, and more just like trying to dive into the backstory of why it meant so much and why there was so much emotion like going through the streets of Chicago for me, and why finishing, I'd picked this arbitrary goal of trying to run under 6-minute pace, which is 2:37:20 or something, you know, like it just seemed arbitrary, but it meant so much that I put it into an essay, and then I put it online. And by the nature of Facebook back then, like just got this huge reach. And then what was cool is I could see it was shared on all these groups that I was not a part of, that I couldn't see. So I'm like, how did you find this? And they're like, oh, it got shared in my run club, or, you know, our Roadrunners Association of Ohio. And I was like, whoa, this is super powerful. And yeah, I mean, I've since put dozens of essays out and really gotten into thinking about myself more as a writer in this space. And also shortly thereafter, I'd say like about 2 years, around 2016, 2017, I started to really use my Instagram to document my running experience, which many people do. It's not like that particular, but I realized I've actually gone back and thought about it a lot. And I was like, you know, I think by then I'd been on Instagram like 5, 6, 7 years and was getting a little tired of the like, hey, look, it's Christmas. Like, oh, we're at the beach, like the year. And I was like, oh, but there's this thing I'm noticing, like the nerves before a race day. I kind of want to write about that. Or like, you know, the camaraderie you find with that person you just met out on the road during the middle of a race. So I started writing about these I thought of it as like, again, documenting little threads of things in the running world that I didn't want to forget about, which it's funny describing these things because so much of this stuff exists now. But at the time, I think, you know, we still are all just trying things. But at the time, I was just very much trying it. And so, yeah, bit by bit, I put out more and more essays to the point where I was like, oh, I should have in 2019, I was like, I should put up a website to like help people find the other essays, you know, and that's where the internet becomes, like we've talked about, like so always changing and morphing and algorithms and things, because I started a newsletter and a mailing list essentially in 2019 because people were like, how do I know if there's a new essay by you? And I'm like, I guess medium.com will alert you. Like, you just start to feel like, how can I be as proactive as possible for the people who genuinely are like, let me know. And I'm like, am I just going to individually email like each person who said like, hey, yeah. So yeah, it's snowballed, and like that I think like you guys have spoken to, that back and forth with people in the running world from around the world becomes this thing that's like highly addictive, like totally always still a surprise. Hearing how the things you put into the world, the things I've been putting in the world, impact people. So yeah, it feels like it's both been going in ways I never predicted, and also like hopefully like just getting going, and we'll see where things lead.
Do you still have that webpage now? Do you still use it?
Yeah, I mean, peterbromka.com.
Okay.
To my chagrin, I just realized recently that it's on like an old Squarespace editor, and if I want to like make anything cool, it's like, oh, sorry, you have to rebuild the whole thing. So I'm trying to think about that, like how dynamic to make it. I think of it as like, how do I think about it? If you're in a moment of reading, what I hear from people is like, they don't necessarily read my stuff super fast or all at once, but they like start to pull on that thread, and like one essay that friends send around will lead to another essay. And it's worth noting that during that period, 2017, 18, 19, I was like heads down, training as hard and running the marathon as hard as I had ever run in my entire life. And so I was really like nose against the grindstone, seeing things intensely. I was feeling them like very intensely. And I mean, Mike, I am always inspired by the way you said, like, I wasn't really seeing, shows in the style that I wanted to see, so I thought I'd make that show. I think that is essentially like very similar to, I had grown up around running and read, up above me I had like a bunch of the classic books in the running world, and I was like, okay, there's like a lot of books by former champions or people who've overcome like really impressive things, and those are like always interesting. And I'm like, I'm sort of in this middle. I'm just like trying hard and feeling these things that I don't know if, are people talking about this? I think more people should be talking about this. So that's what I wanted to put in the world. The most widely read essay I have written to date is The Marathon Doesn't Owe You Anything, which all came about because in 2018 I was training so hard and really obsessing like this marathon game. We know like the different spring races and the fall races, and some guy I followed on Strava at the time posted like, oh man, had a tough one, like this is not the marathon I deserved. And I was like, deserved? Like, what did he deserve? Like, we all train hard and we all try, but like it just felt like I fundamentally disagreed with how he was seeing it. And I was like, but what is that? Why is that? So I decided to explore that sort of I consider that essay like a love letter to the journey of a marathon. And it's been read like tens of thousands of times online, and people will constantly write me out of the blue and be like, this got sent around my run club. We're 16 weeks out from New York, and someone sent it out, and thank you for writing. So I always put my email at the bottom of essays saying like, like, reach out. Like I'm a person. I'm not like a media brand, like it's just, so it's been interesting to see my writing show. I really do think like these things have multiple lives. Like I had my life with it, and then I put it out, and you see people like have handwritten it, passages from some essays, and like put on their wall. Or, I mean, I wrote an essay where I wrote the phrase like, you are strong, you are able, as a reminder to myself that in those moments where you're really like, you will be tomorrow in your 5K, like you'll be right up against like, no, I can't do it. And then you'll be like, no, like I am strong right now. I can do this. And so this woman, you get tagged on Instagram, like she has tattooed like strong, like safe, able on her knuckles. And I'm like, whoa, okay. Like people are really I'm like flattered, but I'm like, people are making new meaning from, to me, that's like their own layer on it. So I think it's pretty fun. And I think it's why like Relay came about, because we all had this feeling of like wanting to connect with others who were trying things and didn't always know what would come of them.
Yeah, I think that's dope. I mean, because like there's like this whole like runner influencer vibe, you know, and I feel like the reason I've always had like some type of pushback, like or I recoil a little bit when I hear the word because I picture something that I don't think that I am. Not in a bad way, not like that. I think that I'm not good enough to be something that I envision, but I'm just, oh, I'm not that. Like I have this one image that probably is incorrect, but it's just like everybody has like when they hear certain words, it's just like that's what they picture. But when the cool thing about like the way that at least that I was introduced to you and the way that you explain like the way that your writing has kind of circulated, it's circulated all over, and it has its own life and second life and third life, that you're influencing in a much different way than like the typical like influencer vibe that you kind of see. And I really appreciate like the way that to have an influence enough where people think that years later something that you wrote about your experience now just helps someone through a marathon, or like I think you just briefly said something about throttling a few seconds up or down, you know what I mean, that thing you wrote right before Boston, and I thought about that a lot during my race, so you're influencing like in many different ways, and it's just really cool to hear you doing it in a way that's like super expressive to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I landed a couple years ago on this idea of honesty and insight are like the two filters I use for myself. Like, am I being really honest about what I feel and I'm thinking? And is there an insight in there that I find interesting? Because, like we're obsessing like, okay, how are we going to make the most about Boston? And then I've done this enough times that I would notice, oh, there's this, I call it like there's a layer of like the fortune cookie truth to like how to like it's about the journey, not the destination. Like pressure is a privilege. There's all these things that we like get passed around, and you're like, sure. But like what's interesting to me is how it's always harder than we think it'll be. Like it always it's not as though we just apply these principles and ta-da, like success every time. And so what I have thought about is like I only want to put stuff into the world that adds to like the genuine resourcefulness of like this feels really true. And sometimes I'll like write something down and I'll be like, wait a second, there's like a deeper thing going on there that I maybe am not acknowledging to myself yet, or like why does this matter to me, or why is this difficult? And so yeah, I mean, I've thought about it broadly about like running and marathoning, and then I've also thought about it very specifically around like Boston. I've run Boston 8 times now, and what I love is like you could just keep trying it, and there's all these little nuances. So I try to approach it, and I think kind of everyone in relay has this. That's why we get along well, is this deep respect for like this game being bigger than us, and it's not as though we've figured it out. And so there's people if you kind of go to that generic, like annoying influencer, it's like, I have it all figured out. I'll just like, I'll sort of over explain to you how to do it. But then I think there is like maybe we can transition like the blessing and the curse of, I have done a lot of stuff that I've mostly written when I've just felt compelled, like I need to write this piece. I haven't written a lot I haven't, spoiler alert, I haven't written for much financial gain. I've made a lot of the essays I've written for outside trail runner, podium runner, were like a couple $100, they're just like, so when you're only getting compensated at that level, like I'm going to own, it's not enough money to like corrupt me, like, what do you want me to say for 20 grand?
Sure. I love
50
these
grand.
shoes.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of go, so editors have written me and been like, would you want to write more? And I'm like, tell you what, for the amount of money you're offering, like I'll just be thinking on topics, and then as they come to me, if I feel like I could write that essay, like I really want to, then I typically pitch. But there are many, I don't consider myself a real journalist in the space because I don't write frequently enough, and I don't pitch, and I don't pursue pieces at the frequency of some of our, peers and friends who really, they hustle hard and they like make they pieced together a whole living off it, which I have a tremendous respect for. But there is a temporality. Like you joked about this being an evergreen episode. I really try to write about things. I do race recaps here and there, but I try to write about things that I'm like, I want to get this down, and I want to be able to come back to it. And I think it's important. Whereas a lot of the things we come across in the written internet are like, it's hot, it's right now, and then it's gone, and like it's meaningless, and it like you would never go back to read a race preview for Western States 22 or something. But like, so I'm glad someone writes that. Like, great.
So then for the marathon doesn't owe you anything. Like what you said was like your most well-read piece. Like, did you make any money off of that at all?
Oh, so like it's the Medium. That's where like, I've made maybe a few $100s on Medium. It doesn't always, it'll break it out actually monthly by like, here's what we paid you per, you got this one earned $3.50 today.
Well, I didn't know Medium had that. So I thought Medium was just like a place where you just like throw stuff up into the ether.
Absolutely. So they created a paywall where you get like 3 articles for free. I mean, but to be honest, a month, and then if you subscribe, then you get unlimited. And so then if you get readership, you get views and reads, then you get paid per because of the people who are paying into the pot. I will say though, for who I am in this world, like I'm like, I think I want to make my essays free because I would rather them impact more people than like me get 75 cents. And then I see I'm not sure what the latest is over at Medium, but there would be a tech reporter who's like, here's top 10 reactions to the Apple VR headset. And you get like, you'd see it had 30,000 views. And I'm like, okay, like that's a beat. That guy is hopefully getting compensated. And then Medium is, making it worth his time to put his stuff onto Medium. I will say I had a buddy who works in the internet space a couple of years ago be like, you need to be driving people to peterbromka.com and just like put your writing on your own website and like have them want to sign up for your mailing list and just like build something that's more yours. And so I stopped putting stuff on Medium, and I kind of agree with that. I'm like, it's not a big financial move one way or another, but I got tired of leaving it up to Medium whether or not people like found out about the next piece. I didn't think they were doing a great job of that, and I certainly wasn't gonna make life decisions based on like the $65 every couple months. And so and I got an email. It looked like decently generic, but it was like, hey, we miss you over at medium.com. Like you used to put pieces over here, and let us know how we could hop on a call and make it worth your time. And you're like, I see why they need creators, but I mean, you see this all the time on YouTube, I'm sure. Like, what are the ways that changes they make? So I would say like the money over there was fine, and it's like, but it's what was interesting was when I made it. At some point, I started a Patreon, which I was just like, hey, I don't even know what this will be, but if you want to support what I'm putting into the world, and that was like not insignificant money in terms of like, I was never exactly, I would say maybe use present future tense. Like I'm still not totally sure what to put over there because I certainly don't write frequently enough to say like, oh, I'll write one exclusive, article a week or a month. And the same has been true for, I moved my mailing list over to Substack because they do a nice job of design. And I think they're doing a good job with a brand. Like if you say, hey, sign up for my Substack, my sense is people are like, okay, that's a thing. Like I could subscribe or I could unsubscribe, and it's not sketchy. Whereas if you say like, hey, give me your email, they're like, whoa, like what do you like? Yeah, people are like, what are you doing with it? And you're like, what am I doing with it? I thought you wanted my writing. Like I'm not. So it's constantly this. I'm sure you guys can commiserate. Like you have to step outside yourself and see like how would this be perceived by people who are not thinking through it the way I'm thinking through it.
Yeah, I've never collected an email address for that reason, just because like that's my reaction when someone was like, hey, enter your email and I'll do this and this and this for you. I'm like, no thanks. Is this a blog? I could just visit the site periodically. That's kind of how I feel, And so like like Substacks, I've subscribed to a handful here and there, but like the whole like the advice that they give to people like us, I guess.
Yes.
Like, you have to make sure you control your audience, or like have control over how you contact them. Because like, what if Medium goes away, or what if YouTube shuts down tomorrow? They're like, how would you communicate with them? I'm like, well, if YouTube went down, email's probably gone too. So I'm like, I'm not
like bigger things.
Right.
So I'm not concerned about that, but it is the advice that seems like the best practice that seems to be out there, but I don't follow that at all.
I worked at an internet startup 10 years ago, and this woman was like, or someone on our team was like, we're hosted on Amazon Cloud. And then this person on the team was like, what if Amazon Cloud goes down?
Yeah.
And then we were all like, man, then the internet's got bigger problems than our website going down. Like, life is not moving forward that day. And we've seen it a few times. So yeah, I think it's a shrewd perception of like, I feel like, and honestly, we've been thinking about this as Relay. We just announced we're going to move to public because the paywall thing has been like unclear how to talk about it, how to communicate, and we're all like, we know what it's like to be that consumer who's saying like, how should I spend dollars? And so I would say it's constantly evolving. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to learning to be totally frank, I'm looking forward to learning from all of you how to think about and talk about and communicate if we end up taking on ads, like how that can be, just very upfront. I find myself like Matt Chittum years ago would be like, athletic greens, da da da, and then I would text him like, what do you actually think of athletic greens? Like, do you actually drink that green stuff, or are you just sort of like spitting it out? And he'd be like, and then we tend to be friends with upstanding people who say like, no, I'm not like reading ads for things I think are trash, but it's a suspicion. So yeah, I mean, I have known, for me, it started and ended with, I really love running. I love the running like ecosystem of stuff that's out there, and I want to contribute stuff to it that I'm really proud of, and that I think I'm like, that was interesting to me, and I'm obsessing it, so maybe it'll be interesting to other people. And maybe that's not that different than other people. I will say, like, I grew up writing, and like I got more into writing recently because I just had that. I used it as an outlet. My mom said to me years ago, like, why are you how did this writing stuff come about? I'm like, I think I've always been a writer, but I didn't really have that thing to dive deep on. And so once those two overlapped, then I was like, let's roll.
You said something there, like you said that you don't think that the way that you, that you write about things that you're interested in, or you do things that you're interested in, and then maybe someone else is, and you said maybe that's not that different from everybody else. I think I think that's accurate. Like, I think that's the way to go about doing any of this, is to see something that you're interested in or that you want to see more of, and then like just doing that thing. And I think that all of the people that have larger followings or are contributing something meaningful to the space, I think they all probably started in that same manner. Like, I know like Mike or Kofuzi was like, yo, I never call you Mike, and like right now I do. But like, so when he started doing the shoe reviews, it was like he was like, there's not enough here for me to, like, there's something missing, like somebody should be talking about these. And so he started it, and then now he's like, now look at him. I mean, he it's the only time he's like, he's a superstar. But I think that's like, it's nice to hear you say that, and like in a different avenue than I would have considered. But then that anybody listening too, it's like, because I've had people like directly message me like, hey, how do you get a contact at Saucony, or how like like legit like directly, like, can you send me your whatever, and I'm like, your person, and I'm like, that I don't know if that's the way to go about doing it, but I think it's the thing about like, it just, if you're listening and you want to do some of this or something on your own, don't like, just do the thing that you feel like really good about and interested in, and then just keep going at that, and then eventually it could be something, because there's so many people on the planet, like chances are like at least 500,000 people probably like what you like, you know what I mean, at least that's a lot of people.
You get that. I mean, I've heard recently, I mean, that's what's interesting about almost this show, is like the discussion of we're like discussing the act of what we're doing, like the craft. I mean, and that idea of like what works for you, you got to try things and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And, you know, so for you, Tommie, like I always like when you go live and you're answering questions and you're just sort of like, it feels like we're sitting there with you. And if you extrapolated that to like advice for like everyone on Instagram should start going live and chatting, like I'd be like, oh gosh, this is horrible. No. Like we've created a monster. Because it came naturally to you. I mean, Mike, in 2020, I was like thinking about doing more writing, more consulting, stuff I do. And my buddy at Nike, who worked in media planning and stuff, called me and he sent me 2 Nick Bare videos and he's like, don't say no. I think you should do this. I think you should do like a daily vlog about your life. He's like, it both is exploding and there's a dearth of content for men your age. Like looking at the demographics, there is like not enough content for men your age. And I was like so pissed because I was like, I think you're right and I just don't want to do it. But I don't think you're wrong. But
you didn't want to do the vlogging, or you didn't want to be Nick Bare? Because he's a very different person than you.
Oh, no, I mean, I have respect for Nick.
He's like, no, I want to be Nick Bare. I just don't want to do the content.
Yeah, I want to be Nick Bare. Actually, well, I don't know about you guys. Like, these people are just like people. Like, I was in Austin 2 winters ago, and I crossed paths with Nick. I'm like, hey, what's up, man? Yeah. And he's like, hey. And I'm like, thanks for your stuff. He's like, thanks. And then we like kept walking, and I was like, that to me is like the way I love to interact with quote unquote celebrities. Like, you know, like don't need selfies, don't need like, it's just like cool. Yeah.
Do you regret doing that in 2020? Like trying to start like daily something at that point?
I've wondered about that.
It doesn't seem very like on brand for Peter Bromka to put it, to use a phrase.
Yeah, no, exactly. I don't think it would have. I think technically, if you distill what I do to like storytelling, it makes a lot of sense. I don't think, in a good way, he was pushing me sort of like any good friend does. That's like, hey, if you're interested in this, I think you should pursue it more, because it seems like the roads are leading that way. But I mean, for instance, Mike, the way that you show us part of your life, but not all of your life. My joke. You know, the whole like people say, what's up, fam? Like, what's up, friends? I'm like, I was joking to my wife, I'm like, if I had started a YouTube video, like the YouTube followers would have been my family because you would have left me and like I'd never see my son again. I was just like,
what's up, my only family? It's Peter here.
Yeah, text me if you have my number, please. Here's my number. I've been alone. No, I mean, and obviously you can make it what you want to make it, but then I've heard these stories. Like I'm friends with Josh Sanchez, who has really hustled hard to make a bunch of stuff, and he's told me at times like he's really run himself into a deficit and had to recharge, even though he enjoys it. You know, it's just like it can take.
I love Dr. Josh, by the way.
Oh, of course.
I tried to keep. Have I told you the story? I tried to keep up with him at a 5K in Eugene at Worlds.
Oh, so Worlds,
there was the 5K at Worlds for the marathon. There's a mass participation event too. And I see Dr. Josh there, and I'm like, all right, I know he's a lot faster than me, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try and get some footage of him at this race, because I wasn't running it hard. I was just going to run it. And so I was like, I'm going to go up by Dr. Josh, and I'm going to try to GoPro him for as long as I can.
Wow.
I'm like, maybe I'll keep up with him for like 200 meters, right? The race is about to go off already. Before the race even starts, people are like just flooding in front of me. They're sizing me up, and they're like, no. And so they're just like kind of like edging their way in front of me. And so even before the gun goes off, I'm like 4 rows back. The gun goes off. I start sprinting as hard as I can. And even at my sprinting, he's still putting distance away from me. And I was like, see you later, Dr. Josh.
Yeah. Bye, buddy. I mean, what I love, and this is where like the craft becomes like its own motivation. He and I have run some races. We're technically on the same team, although he lives all different places, so I don't see him as quite that much. I have never gotten to ask him like how much putting stuff on YouTube has motivated him to try more repeatedly. Like he'll just show up to the track and be like, I'm going to try break 15 today. And I'm like, Jesus, that sounds really hard. And like, he'll just, I've watched the video. He's like cracked himself for 2 miles and then like falling apart. But I'm like, I know how hard, we all know how hard, like regardless of pace, how hard that is to do. And so I'm like, I wonder sometimes like, oh, is it, I can't get myself to do that, but maybe if you're like, I have this invested audience and they would love to see me do it, so like I'm gonna go to the well today. So yeah, he said, I remember on Instagram he announced he was gonna hammer that World's Citizen Race 5K, and I was like, oh god, that sounds horrible. Like I'm gonna be jogging around cheering you on. And I remember being like, here we go.
Yeah, I think he came in like 4th or 5th that day. He did really well. I came up to him much later after this. I was about 5 minutes behind him.
That is interesting though that you asked him like if like what he does like lends like actually has him like work harder and train more, and I think that like I'm in the same like kind of oddly in the same boat. Like I'm not like at that level at all, but I think that like that's how I started doing doing videos, was just sharing the journey. And I think at that time in my life I just kind of needed like likes and stuff and just like affirmation that I was going in a positive direction. But
what about accountability?
Yeah, and it was both. It was like, I'm gonna go try to run this, or I'm running a marathon or a half marathon or whatever, and I'm gonna try to do this. And it was for that accountability, like to have more people kind of see you doing it. But then it also like is that like reassurance that like, okay, this is a positive thing and I'm going in a good direction and other runners, like it. So this is, we're good to go. And it wasn't like I don't think I wasn't close enough to running to know that they were run influencers and stuff. So I don't even know like I think it was like 2018. So I don't even know like what was happening then like in running anyway. Other than like Eliud Kipchoge breaking 2, in 19, I think that was, or 18. Yeah.
But it's very intuition. It's intuitive to you. You're like, well, this would be fun.
And it was just create some stuff, have some fun, and then as it's gone though, I have used it as like I got to keep going, and not because I have to, because I want to. Like I want to keep going, and I want to keep sharing, and I want to keep like creating this content. So it is kind of cool to like get rolling in a direction, and use it for like good, like for
to keep that momentum. Yeah, I think of this idea of like to do some of the stuff we all do, like to go out on a random Sunday and say like it really, really matters how I perform in this foot race. We do, I think, have to. There's this idea of a hero's journey and like thinking of yourself taking on something heroic and not just backing down. I'll say I have people reach out to me all the time and they're like, I love your stuff. I don't like racing because it's too stressful for me. I love running. I want to know about if there's new shoes or new things I should be trying. But like the journey you describe, I relate to, but have chosen not to pursue because it's just too nerve-wracking for me. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can understand that. I will say, like, I don't know if you've seen, I wrote a piece in the spring of 2018 called Burn the Boat, where I just declared I was going to go for the OTQ. And that to me is like the most crystallized version of what you're saying, Tommy, where I was like, I really want to go after this and I want to think through all the things it's going to take. And I kind of want, I don't think I had actually thought it all the way through of like, I want social accountability from the running community. But I think I did. I was like, I want to put this out there and I think I'm going to fail. So I want to like name that and like let myself free from that like expectation. It's interesting. You put these things out in the world. I'm sure you guys see this, the stuff that comes back to you. So like I'll tell people like, I'll ask people like, hey, what's your goals? Let's say guys who are around like 2:30 for the marathon. And I've sometimes wondered, I hear it so often, guys say like, well, I'm thinking about eventually trying to get that OTQ. I'm like, it's also okay if that's not your goal. Like, I'm not going to think less of you if you don't want to try to go after this absurd time. But I'm like, maybe there's a monster of my own creation. Like by declaring it so publicly, other people have been like, yeah, I'm going to go after it too. And I'm like, okay. And I've actually said to a lot of them, like, just so you know, like, pick a time barrier, like if you haven't broken 2:45 or 2:35 or 2:30, like that's a really fun journey as well. And it's not just like you should only look at this number picked by like this governing body. Because I worry that this whole the act of like declaring big goals can start to become like over-grandized, and people can I think just miss a lot of the fun along the way, because they're like, it's all about the mountaintop, and you're like, well, but what about like a really fun day that just happens to be a number, somewhere in the middle?
Well, yeah, I think like the part about like content and influencing thing, it all lends itself to certain numbers, like the sub 3, as opposed to like if somebody's like, yo, my goal is just to break 310, that doesn't sound as good as like dropping a YouTube video with the title of I'm trying to break 3, and I'm trying to, like it's I think it's we do it to ourselves, but it's like it's right though, like you should, whatever your goal is, that's okay, like for that to be your goal. It shouldn't be like because everyone's trying to break 3 that you have to like anything less than that is not good enough or something.
That's like the BQ. Like if you can't BQ, like, it's like we're
Well, I remember like the first like influencer that I remember that like I ever recall like I'm like, oh, this is like not a professional person, but I'm very interested in this running, was Kelly Roberts. And she had her series BQ or Bust. It started out on YouTube, and then I think it moved to Instagram, and now that's her kind of stuff has morphed to like a whole different kind of ecosystem of content that she creates. But I remember like she originally had videos about her kind of like attempt at the BQ, and I feel like if it was just like some other time that is more, I guess, like not that the BQ wasn't realistic, but it was just some other number that wasn't a round number like 4, 330 or 3, it just wouldn't have had the same kind of like attention grabbing to it. And so like I do think that sometimes there can be a little bit of like maybe a not healthy like feedback loop of like, well, I'm in this space, I need to do something big, and like saying like, oh, I want to do a 305 doesn't sound great, even though that might be a really great next goal for me, so it's like, but then the other part of me is like, well, then that's just marketing though. Then you just make it a sub 3 journey with the next marathon being 305, and then that's series 1 and series 2, so it's like I don't know, like at what point does it become like a tail wagging the dog? But like at the same time, I'm like, I fall for it too. I'm like, I don't want to watch 315 or bust, I want to watch BQ or bust.
Yeah, I mean, my friends have made fun of me in a good way by when I'll occasionally send like a YouTube video to friends and be like, this guy bothers me, it's not you. And they're like,
it's okay if it is me.
This guy, they're like, Chittum's like, why don't you just call Mike yourself? But I mean, we all have seen that, like there are definitely some people on YouTube with some killer thumbnails that like then you get into it and you're like, why am I my gripe is always like, why am I looking at this guy's oatmeal again? Like, why? They're like everything that a first time marathoner eats the week of, and you're like, okay, maybe I didn't click on that one, but like there's like you're saying, there's a lot to be sort of wrung out of these journeys, but it doesn't need to be. And there's so many people in this space that like I try to give people the grace and the benefit of the doubt, be like, this isn't necessarily for someone who's run a bunch, but maybe for the very first timer. I think there's a tremendous opportunity, right, for like around that first time New Yorker. There's so many people, right, who are going to run New York as their first marathon for the first time, and more storytelling in that space. I'm sure there's a ton, but like I have to appreciate. So like I try to appreciate. Okay, that can be really valid for someone else. But then I've tried to line up, like we talked about, like I've said it and I mean it, like that I identify with the people who are really staring down a goal, regardless of what the time is, and are really tackling it and biting off chunks and just like working at it over time, whether it is like 2:30, 3, 3:34, and I think I mean that. I mean, I've genuinely read race reports and watched videos of people who like at all different paces when they're really committed. There's a certain, but I mean, I'll admit there's a certain style of like, I'm the expert, I'll show you, that just always like gets under my skin, because I'm like, oh, the thing about running is there's always someone faster than you. So like if you try to big dog, like you're just going to get humbled, So that's where I find I gravitate towards the content creators who are like, oh, this game is never ending, and it's like there's so much to explore, and then but it does play out over different mediums.
Like for a little bit, like for in the beginning of my marathon journey, like it was definitely like getting the BQ. Luckily, I got it fairly quickly into that part of the journey, and I guess now that we're talking about, I could have gone like, okay, what's next? Like, what number's next? And I just never did that. It was just like, we're just gonna keep working, we're gonna keep going, and if I PR, we PR. You know, like that'd be great. You know, like I train for a number, and then I'm gonna try to run this number, not necessarily like, you know, this is how you run a sub, 240, and then like have to like try to manage that, and because that can be, I mean honestly, like that could be a really tough thing for people, because like I know people and you see people all the time that are looking for this number, and it's just it's not a healthy like dynamic between themselves and the number, and if they don't get it, and I'm not talking about like everybody that hasn't done like a sub 3, but like there's certain things you can see like it bothers, more, not necessarily because I didn't get my goal, but because all of my content or all of my being has been like, this is how you do this, and you see people like kind of preach like, this is how you run a sub 3, and then it's like, that can't be your identity, because I'm not going to run a sub 3 every time. Like, no, I mean, you will, Peter. I mean, but it's like,
but it's also like even the way you phrase that, how some people are like, this is how to run a sub 3.
Yeah.
Like, I would never even say, I think we're all in our own different bodies. As I start to coach athletes, I'm like really having to translate the lived experience, because I know that I don't even know if what worked for me is going to result in the same reaction in their body. And so I just think it's a little bit, that's like a big red flag for me. Like, follow this to break 3. I'm like, whoa.
Totally.
And so that's why I appreciated
it. It's like Kipchoge saying like, follow this to break 205. It's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, okay. It shows like a lack of awareness of all the variables that come to play. And so I try to focus less on like the how-to, and maybe to my detriment, like maybe I would be bigger if I was like, this is how, and then bigger is this, all these phrases, like, are we just, is it about followers, is it about influence?
If you wrote a thing or made some content and said, this is how you do this, like talking about Peter Bromka, if you said this, it would do very well. Like, if you said, this is how you run a sub 3, it would probably go like, it wildfire. Yeah. I mean, it would, but I respect the fact that you wouldn't do that because of the way that you just how you like operate.
And like you're saying, for where I'm sitting, I would be very hesitant to make promises about stuff that not fully appreciative of like all of the factors that have to come to play. Because in the same way that I know, like I have teammates who are very fast, and I'm just like, I am trying and they are trying, and I am watching what they're doing, and I could try to emulate what they're doing, and it's going to be really hard for me to get to them. So if they turned around, they're like, well, I mean, the best part was there's this guy on my team who has broken 4 for the mile, and he was like, guys,
this is how you do it.
Yeah, he was like, a lot of people are getting injured, and like, I just need you guys to know, like, we don't have scholarships anymore. He's like a couple of years out of college. He's like, everyone should just, if you're feeling an ache or pain, like chill. Just like take it easy. And we're like, man, this guy we love him, but he doesn't have a full appreciation for how much talent he has, and how like in some ways easily the fitness comes to him, because he's like saying that to guys who are just grinding, just really working as hard as guys I know. And I'm like, so we were able to laugh about it, but we're also like, the moment you turn around and go like, do exactly as I did, it can be a very quick recipe for failure.
Well, if you did, then it would be like, the marathon doesn't owe me anything, but Peter Bromka sure as hell does, because he said I was going to run sub 3.
Wait. I've shifted to making promises. Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you this though, because like like Tommy was like, well, you wouldn't do that, making like a how to run a sub 3 kind of thing. But I mean, you are coaching, so in a way, you kind of are to the people you coach. But like, how do you decide? I mean, because you're kind of like, you have a persona that you've developed, whether it was intentional or not, just by the way and the things that you've selected to kind of put out there. How do you decide like what is something that Peter Bromka does and what isn't? Because like on the one hand, I feel like you're kind of like a like something between a mix of like a Hemingway and a Kerouac in the running space. And then on the other hand, I'm like, you came to TRE last year and you were like looking at shoes, you know? So it's just like, how do you decide what is and what isn't Bromka?
I mean, I think it's a great question that I hope to continue to evolve. I have definitely started from trying to keep it a really tight circle of I'm only going to put out stuff that I feel is I've deeply, genuinely experienced, and I'm like almost documenting it for myself. I mean, I benefited. It was easiest for me. It's kind of like skiing downhill. Like the more speed you have, the more like you're able to like stay aligned, and the more you like it's the less steep you kind of go slower, and you can like fall over and catch yourself on a little bump. When I was training as hard as I was in 17, 18, 19, I was like, the grindstone was right against my nose, and I would just be like trying my hardest and seeing and feeling things so genuinely that I didn't have an ulterior motive of like, ooh, this will play well. Like a lot of people will like this. I mean, I've definitely written things and been like, I think that's the truest, most beautiful thing I've written. And like, I make fun of myself for shoving a bunch of words into Instagram, right? Like that's not the intent. Like the intent is for beautiful pictures and engaging scrolling videos. So I've had a lot of fun with it, but I think it will be interesting for me as even partaking in Relay and like putting up a graphic about a podcast. I'm kind of like, I think this is worth people's time, but we're going tangential slightly from here's a lived experience. I felt that deeply and I want to share it with others. To, I mean, I wrote some stuff when I was like the few times I failed at running the OTQ that I had felt the moments so intensely that I just wrote down what came to mind and like pressed post and was just like, whoa, that in hindsight, I'm like, that was some really raw emotion that I didn't spend much time processing before I put it online. But there was this, like you're saying, Tommie, like this very virtuous sense of people like being supportive and I don't like not much room. Even the way it plays out over different mediums, like on Twitter, I would like post a lot of participate in debates and participate in discussions. And I think that due to the nature of Twitter and where it all kind of went south, I actually in 2019 or something had to just write some rules for myself and be like, you're not going to try to convince anyone of anything. You need to stop, like, don't be snarky. Like no one has time in their life for like snark, like, because I caught myself kind of getting sucked into these ways of being on that platform. And so, yeah, as I think about like, oh, it would be fun to do more podcasts about this, or it would be fun to do Relay collaborations about that. I'm like, okay, what will my new rubric be for like, should we do it or should we not do it? I think the answer was we'll probably try out of a genuine sense of like interest and, trying to come to it with some humility and put things out there. But yeah, I think it's an open question going forward. What I saw it is like I'd read enough running books growing up that I kind of knew what existed and I knew what I liked and I knew how little there is out there. So I felt a freedom to like just try stuff because there just wasn't that much out there. I will say in the last 2 years, there's just been this ramping up of like the machine wants more content and more, like the internet is just like faster, shorter, like and I've been like, whoa. And that's really what compelled me to start to outline. A year ago I sat down and outlined a book that I want to write, that I am writing actively about my journey leading up to 2016, 17, 18, 19, those 4 years of like heads down running. Because I'm like, as much as I want to make stuff that, yeah, like this will go up and then it'll fade into the ether, I also want to try to put some stuff out there that people could come back to years from now and be like, that was one era of running, but it was like his best attempt at like codifying something that could stick around.
So are you going to go back to TRE again this year?
Oh yeah. So then TRE was, I had always wondered, like, it sounds interesting and I can't know unless I try. Mm-hmm. Like, so it was honestly, the hardest thing for me was I had a blast because of all the people there. I don't know. I didn't have. It'll be interesting to see what plays out in the next 6 months. I'd love to be able to make an excuse to go to it. I don't have a financial like quick payoff for reason to be there, but I think it could be fun to go to that type of stuff in the future. I actually more hover at the layer of I don't have a reason to be in New York this year because I'm not like literally for myself as a runner, but different runners from New York have been like, hey man, it'd be great to meet you. I'm running New York. Are you going to be there? So I really get more excited about the way you guys like create reasons to be in different cities for big events because I love connecting with the running world like that.
Yeah, I'm just going. I'm not running this year. So I'm going to go, and my plan or hope is to kind of like reach out to brands and see like, all right, you guys are trying to do like 6 events over the course of the weekend. Do you want me to like headline one, and maybe we'll do a live stream, maybe we'll do a meet and greet, maybe we'll do a shakeout, so that's kind of like how I try to approach some of those other weekends when I'm not racing, and try to like cobble together like an appearance fee here and there to cover. I mean, it's a fun weekend to go, and I see some of my favorite people whenever I go to these things. And so it's like, how do I figure out a way to make some video content for the YouTube channel, get some like, personal enjoyment out of it by seeing people that I enjoy seeing, but then also get to do other fun things that I like with an audience, which happens to sometimes create some revenue, so that way at least like the hotel and the flights are covered. So that's kind of like my general plan for a lot of events.
Nice. And I think you have a natural way of self-promotion of saying like, this is what I'm going to do. I'd love to, and you genuinely want to see people and connect, like have those moments. Zoe Rome, our former relay member, announced her book yesterday for pre-order, and I was kind of hammering her. I'm like, you got to promote the hell of it. You wrote a whole book with Tina. Like, you got to promote it. And, it can't be, I think in this world of there being a lot of noise, it can feel difficult to talk about stuff. Repeated, we're all busy. We all have a million things going on. So I've appreciated how you're like, I'm going to be in Boston. Here's the schedule for Boston, just as a reminder, like these are the events I'm doing in Boston. I don't think it's, too much or over the top, but it's like, oh yeah, Mike, I wasn't paying attention the first 2 times.
The real reason for that is like every time I make a video of when I went somewhere, they were like, oh, I wish I knew you were coming. I would have came out. And I was like, I talked about this on the Strava Run Club,
everywhere.
On Twitter or Threads or whatever people are using now. I made a story about it on Instagram. I had it pinned to my feed in Instagram. I made a YouTube video about it. I made a YouTube post about it. I'm like, I guess we need to start collecting emails because I need to email people.
That's the problem. People are like,
you need to do push text, like text to right to somebody's phone. I will be here.
And I signed up to learn about that thing a couple of years ago. What's it called? There's a name for you could create like a text message based community.
Oh, really?
Gary Vaynerchuk was like promoting it a lot. Okay. He was like, he's like, if you're a creator and you have an audience that likes your stuff, you can have them opt into. He's like, I think direct
like
text
email
is gonna,
but for text.
But for text, because he's like, oh, this new generation doesn't even check email, but they'd be happy to get a Mr. Beast like text message. And I'm like, okay, Mr. Beast is one tier. Like, do they want to get a Peter Bromka text message? Yeah. And I'm like, what would I put in that? Now I'm blanking on the name, but you're like,
if a Peter Bromka text came in and it wasn't like 3 pages long, I'd be like, this is a rip-off.
Like, this is spam. This is spam.
Yeah. I'm not clicking on that. There's no way it's him. He's never that concise. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a riot.
Yeah, I don't know what the name of that is, but
I think that I've used that before, but not as like a fan. I think I signed up at one point. I signed up for something for, I thought it was super weird, and it happened to be the comedian Jim Gaffigan.
Okay.
The guy that makes all like the food jokes.
Yeah.
And so like I was like, what happens if you reply to this? And it had like, I don't know if it was a bot or what, but like it would like actually kind of talk to you, but in a way that you knew.
Community.
Like,
Community. Yeah. Okay. I was like, why does it sound like it's such an obvious name? But I mean, Mike, for instance, the people you've had on your show, like there. If you had Aaron Azar or something and she had a community, she's like, oh, I'll text you. I'd be like, that's probably going to get some funny stuff. It's probably going to be like, she's going to tell me about things she wants me to know about. Like, I would probably sign up, like, I don't know. Unless it was too much. And then
I'll float the idea by her. I'll see if she uses it.
No, I mean, honestly, Mike, like,
I feel like her audience would love it.
Right, I think your audience might like this. Like, maybe not like texting all year round or whatever, but like the day or two before like a big event that you're gonna be at, like just start mass texting the people that opt in for that race, like for that like New York experience, and you could like literally be texting them every like in the morning, like, hey, the guy's gonna be at such and such, and everybody that's on this list knows like, oh, great. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. He's going to be at the such and such shakeout. We're going to go. So they don't go like, I watched that YouTube video a month ago. I knew he was going to be here, but I totally blanked because I'm doing so much stuff. I mean, I've heard that people have just run full marathons just to have the opportunity to meet Kofuzi. Like, they don't even train for their own personal experiences. They really just want to get to New York.
They want to be in that moment.
Yeah, like I saw this one YouTube video that says BQ or bust to meet Kofuzi.
No way.
Wow.
You did no.
Yeah, go check it out.
You have to send me a link for that one. I haven't seen that one. Because if someone did that, the least I could do is comment on it.
Yeah, you'd be like, hey, buddy.
I think, you know what? Never mind. I got you. I'll post one tomorrow.
Okay. I will say, I mean, that idea of there being people who are genuinely trying to connect. I became friends with Tommie Runz, and I said to him, I don't know what your Instagram, I doubt even works. And he's like, you won't believe, like, he genuinely feels horrible because people will like pour out their heart and tag him. And then like, if you have 300, 400,000 followers, it all just becomes a mush. Yeah. Like the app. And so I've sent him messages where like people I knew, wrote something very genuine. And he's like, thank you so much. Like, I will comment and I'll like this. And he doesn't want those people to feel like they were like screaming into the ether and they got nothing. Like he's like, I'm a regular guy, but like these systems don't scale once you have like that many followers.
In 2019, I had a real life conversation with him via Instagram DM.
Oh yeah,
for like 20 minutes. We were just going back and forth about something, and then I think I got lost in the ether.
Yeah, he's a guy. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
You see, his profile now says like, for inquiries, maybe just don't.
For inquiries, please just don't, with a heart.
Please just don't, like, because he's just like, he only has so much energy, and he's just trying to like do the most he can. But I mean, so it's just these things. It's amazing how regular people can be, shot into the ether for. Yeah. Someone like Laura Green, I see as like she's presenting a stage for us, and so I mean she's still a real person. Like she and I'll message about stuff, but she's at least saying like, this is the stage I'm like setting up, and like I'm entertaining you. Whereas for a lot of people, they're like, I'm being myself, and then people are like, is this a real person? And you're like, yeah, it's a real person. So sorry, we've ventured into so many facets of all of this madness. I will say, like, some of the Instagram stuff has felt like I think there's probably people out there who are thinking about how to like strategically grow their audience or maximize certain engagement, and I have never really seen much pattern with that stuff. The closest I've seen is a one-to-one of like when I've been collaborating with like in photos with people with a lot of followers, then I gain followers. I'm like, okay, great. Like,
yeah.
Do you keep track of your Instagram follower count, Peter? Do you know what it is right now?
Well, that was what was interesting. Like at some point I realized, there's more people than it's still so small, like in the 10,000+, like, but that's definitely like when it went to 10,000, I was like, that's
counting, but it's 12.8. So
yeah, you're like, this is officially way more people than I know, right? Like, and so there's all those. I feel like I just have a drop of like how big that pool could be and how weird it could get for people. But I guess I've seen it as like, well, I'll just keep trying to stay in a lane of genuinely like stuff I'm interested in and not try to like overthink any of the maneuvers about these things.
Do you ever look at, like, I mean, you brought up Tommy Ribs, and I feel like you guys have a different style, like in terms of your writing, but I feel like a lot of the topics overlap and a lot of the emotions certainly do as well. Do you ever look at his and be like, well, he's figuring out a way to like not only do this, be authentic to himself, or at least I assume he feels like he's still being authentic to himself. That's how it feels to me. That's how I perceive it. And yet he's being able to at least make some sort of, like, maybe not off Instagram, but that also helps to lead to, as a platform, as a springboard to other things. Do you ever look at that and say, like, that could be something to emulate, or you just, or like, you know, I just read the bio of don't bother me for inquiries? Like, how do you feel about looking at someone like Tommy Ribs?
It's a great question. I think my joke, the hilarious story from like back in 2019, I was like, hey, Julia, my wife, like this guy Tommy, he has all these followers, and you know he's really good looking and he's fast. And she's like, well, you're good looking and fast.
Thank
and then
you
I
so
like
much.
pulled up a picture of him and was like, here's Tommy. And she's like, okay, he's very good looking. Like,
I'm just gonna act like this whole thing is about me. I'm just gonna say that out loud.
yeah, Tommy. Oh yeah, Tommy, it is about you.
Appreciate it.
I mean, I've written about this a little bit in coming out of the trials chase. Ribs was like, hey man, if there's stuff you want to do, we should talk about how you might pursue those dreams. Like, do you want to run races around the world? Do you want to like gather people to take on something? He's like, because you could tell the story of that pursuit and then we could bring brands along. In short order after that, he got really sick, and it's like really taken his attention in a different direction.
Sure.
And then I think, so to your point about like, there are platforms, I'm sure maybe you guys could almost get into like the geeky nuances of different platforms and the roles they play almost as different tools. Like he has this huge Instagram following, but he's an iFit coach, and he gets employed by iFit, and that's where a lot of his travel around the world is paid for. He is friends with the founder of Ultra, the brand, and so from early on in the days of running of that brand, he was sponsored by them, and I got to see some of the maneuvers. Like we finished Boston right next to each other. Okay, so like I post a photo from Justin Britton, who was up on the photo bridge where I'm smiling, and I'm like, yay. And then he has a photo of him just going like, because he knew his buddy Paul would be over on like stage left, and his buddy Paul would be shooting him, and so then, and he has a crop top on, and he looks like a fucking $10 million, and I'm like, okay, like he is playing a game, he's playing some chess out here, and
so
I'm
like,
just like,
you picked up like 400 followers, and then he like dropped like 10,000 at that same moment, same exact thing.
And he's got his Ultra hat, and like it's like he's playing a role, and he gets it. And I think, I mean, the thing, I think I've mentioned this, when you meet him in person, the first thing he'll say to other guys he's going to be running with is like, hey, I promise I'm not a douche like I might seem online.
I don't think it's that way, but
I don't think anybody thinks he's a douche. I don't think.
I think he knew that amongst this was at CIM 2019, so we're all like getting our bibs from the hotel suite, and he just knew like these are nerdy, introverted dudes who run like 120 miles a week, and they probably think, who is this guy? He probably thinks he's he's all that, and he is so soft spoken, but like, so he is genuinely like, to me, he speaks to. His existence speaks to like the dichotomy that we have inside us. Like he does genuinely want to rage on the course, and they'll say like, let's rage, let's go, and at the same time he does it softly, and he's soft spoken. And so I mean, it's made me think about like what would putting more stuff. I think it has to start, I mean, I'd have to ask you guys, it has to start with like, what is your vision for what you want to see be created, and then you can back into like, maybe there's a brand that would want to partner with me on that, or what would that look like? Who could I bring along on that journey?
I mean, I think it's easy for me to say at this point, but I think that like, you know, I think that's a really good example. I mean, because there are some people that are like, you know, maybe possibly like built for that type of trajectory. You know, like they're.
This is my Tommy Ribs poster, by the way.
Okay. Just being who they are it just really works really well for this space. And then you can really get caught up in trying to like emulate that or try to like be your version of that, and I don't know like if that comes off as authentic as you like it to seem, and it may work a little bit, but then once you get to like a bigger platform and you start having people follow you more, and then you have to recreate this thing that you started with that may not be you and you may not be comfortable with, like that's like my biggest fear, or one of my bigger fears is like going viral for something that isn't really me. You know, then I have to like, then every time I cross the finish line, I have to go like, you know what I mean? Like you have to do a thing. Like I think like Matt Choi is a good example of like somebody who's like really like stepping it up and like skyrocketing. Like I think that's him. You know, I mean, you watching it may seem like he's like creating that, and I think he is. But at the same time, I think that like with the cameras off, he's probably very close to that. You know. And if I tried to do that, maybe I could for a little bit, but it wouldn't be something that I would feel like I'd rather just have my own trajectory and see if I can make, you know, moves or plays like that. And I guess that's my advice for anybody that's like trying to figure this space out, is literally like just do what you do like that makes you feel good, and just try to do that really well and try to document that well, so that if people really like it, then it's fine. Like Laura Green, she's having a really good time doing her thing, and she doesn't have to do like with Lindsay Hein, like she has like the family involved, and you know, not involved, but like, you know, there's not much transparency there really, and she doesn't have to go that way because that's just not her thing, and it is Lindsay's, you know. And I feel like people just, if you find your lane, just do it really well, and who knows where that takes you. Because, like, I honestly don't know why people follow me. Like, I mean, yeah. Like, you know, honestly, like, because I know that people that I've had the same amount of followers as in the past, and I had a different, like, jump, and I just don't know. I'm not really sure. You know what I mean? And I'm okay with that, though, because I know that I haven't done anything that's, like, an attempt to, like, get more followers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I think
like,
what I like to always...
Kofuzi has
I remember that
really well because he's just doing his thing, and he likes it. So he likes shoes, likes to nerd out on shoes, and people like that too. And then now he's like, oh, I'm gonna document this trip, and people like that too. You know, like you just do your thing and just do it really well.
Well, I've joked about how like those of us who love running, you can really only run like a very fractional part of the day, and so it is that thing of like, okay, I already ran this morning. And I still love running, but I'm kind of tired. Oh, I'll watch this Kofuzi video who like is paying off like this thing I love, but like I'm not going to go do it again today. You know, so like you have that capacity for it. We could talk about these things at great length, because what I've had to appreciate, there's more noise and there's more people and there's more personas. I mean, to be totally honest, I don't want to come off wrong, but like Matt kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I first saw his persona, his like larger than life, like he's and what I appreciated, Mike Kofuzi, Mike Koa, you having him on, I watched you guys chat and like him say like, I might not be for everyone, and I am trying to like tell a story and, you know, bring people along, and so I can appreciate that. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like I tried to,
I respected him for that.
I'm like, okay, and I don't think there's any benefit to there being like tension in the running world, like it's us versus them. No, it's just like the running world can get so much bigger, and it continues to grow, and I think it could get way larger. And so what Matt, for instance, was saying was like, I think there's a lot of people like me who would want to come on this journey, who could follow maybe I think my eyes have been opened a lot to how intimidating the running world can be, because I was sort of born into it. And so I think I most closely relate to that tension around like not being good enough, which is similar but different. Like I have always aspired to be faster and always known the guys who are faster than me. And so I have a deep appreciation for how humbling running can be, which is different than not feeling like I was welcome in the space. And so that's what's been really, I think, cool for me to get to be a very like a follower, an observer of like people telling like, here are the nuances that allowed me to feel welcome in this community or in this space, and that's been like, oh cool, oh yeah, as a straight white male, like I didn't feel that much, who grew up running since a kid, like I didn't feel that much of an outsider. What does that feel like? And so that's been helpful for me to just totally check that.
Well, we've been talking for a while, and I've been enjoying this conversation. Yeah. But Peter, you mentioned at the top that you had questions for us, so I don't want to bring you on here and then not let you ask any of those. If you this is now, we've been chatting forever. I mean, the thing I actually think this should be like maybe the third edition of your show or something, because I would just love. I wanted the first edition to be a little bit more of both of you telling what those inflection moments for each of you were, because I'm aware, it's hard to sometimes appreciate, you probably heard me say, like, did you guys read this essay, or have you heard of this essay? Because I'm never quite sure. So for both of you, I would love maybe in a future episode, like more of a backstory of like, what did those inflection moments look like, Mike, for you? Like, okay, I'm going to put on a video. Okay, wow, this is becoming a thing. And then I'm also, I think our audience and I would be super curious about like, what have been any stumbling blocks along that way? Like things you've tried, you're like, turns out people aren't. I thought maybe someone would be interested in this, and turned out they're less interested in that than this other thing. Because I think each of us, these paths are like evolving pretty organically, but with some strategy. And so it's like interesting to see how they've evolved. So I just wanted both of you to wind back the clock like a little further, and I'd love to hear more of that maybe in the future. You can elaborate now, but I'm like interested enough. I would listen to it for a while.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great third episode because I mean, I just said like a minute ago, I don't even know why people follow me for real. I mean, I respect it, I appreciate it, and I think I know kind of, but I haven't really done a bunch of like reflecting on like, when Peter says like he's having a conversation like, hey, have you read? Did you read this article? And I'm assuming that you probably refer to moments that like you remember as like a moment that like something took a jump. Like you're not just randomly like, hey, have you read this one that really didn't change anything for you? It wasn't really impactful for yourself, and maybe you didn't feel like it hit really hard. But like you probably have moments where you just like, this article was a turning point for me because of this, and I just don't know. I think I've had. I think I started doing stuff, and it seemed like I was just making content, trying to have fun with it. Pandemic hit. I started like a little clothing line, and then started a show because I used the name that was the words that were on the shirts to start the show. That was a big point where it's like, okay, all of a sudden I'm talking to people that make sense in the running space. Brands were like kind of watching, and then from there it just seems like it was like all of a sudden just random stuff happening. And I like building relationships and like connecting with people, so like it just seemed really fast from 2020 to now. But I haven't sat and thought about like the last 3 years that much actually. Like I've done some milestone points, like I hit 5,000 followers and I did like a shoe giveaway, so that was fun. But I really honestly, this has just been a bunch of like random ideas that I thought would be fun, and I thought that would be cool to bring to people that follow me, and that's it. And then if it looks cool, that's great, and that just is what it is. I haven't had much like strategic, like this is what I'm gonna do. Here it goes. Like as the moment comes, I feel inspired, so I do a thing. And some things work, some things don't.
Yeah, but also, even maybe this is always when people tell their story. Like, not everyone starts a clothing line in 2020, and then like is like, well, this is clearly paired well with a podcast that like is fun to listen to. Yeah. Like it's easy for someone. It becomes. I think there's a theme there. It becomes like pretty common for people to belittle sort of the secret sauce of like what. If you were to like, and then I try to be very genuine.
and then I started telling the truth.
Yeah. Or like, I put on a persona of someone who cares about other people's thoughts.
That's exactly what I did. Thank you for that. Was the turning point when I started to act like I cared.
But I mean, like Mike, for you, is there a moment of like, I guess I'm going to do this a lot. Not like, I actually don't know this sort of like the trickle or the ascension of like the frequency even of posting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started out posting every day. So I was an everyday, like a family vlogger. So it wasn't even about running. It was just about like being a city dad. And like, I enjoyed making those movies, but like it wears on you. It's a grind. And, but like the nice thing is you get to practice a lot making videos. And you also get to experiment a lot because it's like, it's a general interest vlog, so like who cares what's on here on any one particular day. And so at some point it just like started to switch over to, I'm like, oh, if I bring a camera along while I'm running, then I don't have to follow my kids around with a camera as much, which I didn't mind doing because you're very young, and you know, it's like kids are adorable, and so it's like it's easy to do. But I'm like, you know, I don't mind taking a little bit pressure off of some of the family time in terms of like needing to document it so much. And so that became a turning point for me in terms of like, this just felt easier, and I felt more comfortable not sharing so much of them. And I'm like, it's kind of hard to have a family vlog if you don't feel like putting your family in it. And so I was like, all right, so then now what do I make videos about, you know? And so I dabbled with like, do I show more of like the business that I was running, or do I show more of the running that I was doing? And the running just seemed to kind of catch, and I was like, well, I also like this, and it was a nice way to kind of like stay motivated and hold myself accountable to the 34 followers that I had at the time. You know, and so like that kind of like was like one turning point that just shifted the direction of the content. And then, you know, certain shoes that I did, like there was like, you know, a Pegasus at 300 miles, reviewing the shoe at like end of life. And then starting to film some races. The idea being like, look, everyone, I'm never going to make a Chicago Marathon video and have mine come up in the search. But if I do the Lakefront 10 mile, well, now it does, but like if I do like the Lakefront 10 miler, maybe I can get that one. Or can I do the Color Run 5K in Lincoln Park? You know, like maybe I'll get a couple of hits from people that maybe next year are trying to see what this race is like. And so that was like, so that's how like filming races kind of started. So then like shoes and races kind of became a big part of it along the way. And I was still trying to make video content every day. So I was like talking about what I'm doing for training. Cause again, I'm not a coach. I don't want to be a coach, but I needed something to talk about on a Thursday. You know, so like that's kind of how a lot of the experimentation into the different formats happen. And then after a while you kind of figure out, oh, well, like shoes are a big deal. Events are a big deal. New shoes at an event, that's kind of like a really big deal, you know. So like those are the kinds of things that started out as being like, oh hey, look, people seem to like this, and now those are like tent poles in like the 3-ring circus of my kind of.
When did you figure out, I mean, you've said this to me, I've been like, this reel of this shoe is better than any content that the brand has put out about that shoe. Like, when did that sort of hit you like, I can do this?
You know, well, it's like, when did that start happening? I don't know. I started making reels of shoes not that long ago. Because before it was like Instagram was basically just like, hey, I'll take 15 seconds from my run today just to show everyone that like I bring this camera with me every day. And every day I have footage, and that's how I have this running footage. So like all the review things that you're watching, that's all authentic. That's not like, okay, on a Thursday, because I got this review coming up, set the camera down and run back and forth in front of it a couple times. No, I actually took this for my 10-mile run. I actually took this for a 20-miler. I took it for a speed workout. And so that's kind of how it started, but people didn't really like that. And so like, I was like, do I really have all the energy to make a review video and a separate reel? I don't want to edit this thing twice. But I'm like, oh, actually, you know what? Let's start editing it twice. And then like, in terms of like the time on the calendar when things come out, Instagram can still be more like kind of like more contemporaneous-ish than the review, which might take 2 or 3 weeks of running before I can get that together. And so like that's how things started coalescing. And at a certain point, it got to the point where I was like, all right, I need to make 2 separate piles of content. One that for Instagram that lives on its own and that isn't constantly like, hey, I made a new video, go check it out. I do that sparingly, but that's like some people, that's all their Instagram content, and is like, go look at the YouTube channel. But I'm like, no, people came to Instagram to be on Instagram, so let's make Instagram content. And then I started making YouTube content for YouTube, and that's like a separate pile. And a lot of times they don't crosstalk, you know. And so, so like that's kind of something that I started doing recently, and that's been like later, kind of in it as I had like kind of like bandwidth and pull from like being able to now do this full time. So I have time to edit multiple times over the same kind of like concept, and iterate it finally according to the different platforms. And so like that's much later, but the beginning, the first inflection points were like, let's bring a GoPro to a race and see what happens.
Okay, that makes total sense. I just had not totally followed that. I think you've mentioned that. Guys, this has been so much fun, and I want to hear more about it. We're about to create like a ultra marathon podcast. Like
this will be good for the Saturday long run.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're on mile 12. Let's keep pushing.
Keep. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right,
No,
thanks so
problem,
much, Peter.
man. Yeah, keep writing dope things, man. Because I honestly, like, I've literally like held a few of your insights on your own running. It really has helped me in my like journey, especially in the last like 6 months. So I appreciate it.
Well, actually, I will say Matt Fitzgerald, the author, has said to me, like, remember, like, in the particular, there is the general. So, like, there can this feeling of, like, in the personal, in the very pointed, as an audience member, then we generalize. And so it's okay to not speak in this voice of, like, here's how, like, as the expert, just say, like, I've tried to do that. So, honestly, that essay, Burn the Boat, was, I thought it was very utilitarian. Like, I was going to put it out there, and I thought people might be like, hey, good job, like, go for it, man, like, you're gonna fail but fun. And people have been like, no, I printed that out because like it shows me I created my own parallel roadmap to it for my own goal. And I'm like, whoa, that was so far beyond my expectation. And it's so awesome because mine was detailed to me, and so therefore theirs is not one-to-one. Theirs becomes detailed to them. And I think that's what we've all sort of been circling, is this thing of like, stay true to what is you're actually experiencing, and then people will take from it what they will.
Yeah, and I'll say too, like, because I think, I mean, I second that, because I think I think you do see a lot of people like, maybe I'm projecting, but like a lot of people maybe overshare because they see people sharing, and so they're like, well, I'm gonna share everything. And I think you just have to like responsibly share. But I just the reason I'm kind of prefacing what I'm about to say is one of the posts that like one of my favorite posts like of all time for myself was one that like for some reason the song that I used in that reel like sent me down a road of like, I want to write something about how I feel at this moment. It really didn't have a ton to do with the video at all, but it kind of worked out. Like, so nobody read it like, what's that got to do? It kind of all kind of played together. But it was like I shed a tear like writing it, you know what I mean? And it was just so real to me. But the feedback that I got, because I didn't write it in this like weird like depressing way, it was like other people reached out and said, thank you so much for sharing this. I feel this, I feel that. Like there's a lot of connection in sharing, you know, like your real story. And I learned that like in different, like I just learned that from, you know, my sobriety walk, is people sharing in those rooms their real lives like saved mine, you know. So I think that's the authenticity thing. Like whatever you really feel like you want to share is what you should. And Matt Choi's is how he's sharing that, and Laura Green is how she's sharing that. Don't see other people and be so inspired that you're sharing someone else's version of your story,
or overthinking. What am I? To be too self-reflective of like putting on a persona. That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
All right, guys. I love this conversation. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks everyone if you made it all the way to the end. You'll have to let us know if you did. We really appreciate you guys.
We really do.